Great. Now, let's continue with our chat that's rolling, and I'm going to continue to talk about inventiveness and how to get from crisis to opportunity. Now, the reason why inventiveness is relevant, I would say particularly now, as Hong Kong is slowly opening up again, is that it helps us to pick up the pieces and look for opportunities. We have to open up our creativity and come to a place where inventiveness happens. And that's where most businesses want to be right now. As many of us have maybe lost clients, we running deficits maybe, we lost projects, we have to start rebuilding and adapting to the new reality. So what we'll do is I'll spend some time speaking about how we can get from crisis to opportunity and where we can use that inventiveness and how to prepare for what's next. And then we'll talk about inventiveness in action, as I'll speak with Steve Rigby. And Steve will share some of his insights on how inventiveness has helped him in his remarkable career. So first, I'd like to talk about the 4 stages that take us actually from crisis to opportunity. And each of the stages require a different kind of leadership, the kind that's called resilient leadership. Because this crisis has had major impact on all of us personally and professionally and on our businesses. So it's had an impact on our company's strategy, on its structure, its processes, but mostly it's had an impact on the people working for us as well. So whether you're part of a larger organization or you have a smaller team, we'll look at what type of leadership is required to support the people through these changes and to make sure that we as leaders and the people working for us are all moving in the same direction. So we'll take the whole team with you on your journey to recovery. So let's look at stage 1. Stage 1 is the actual moment crisis hits. It's when there's so many things happening at the same time, no one has clarity, and it may feel like a roller coaster ride. And this corona crisis has hit most of us very hard. And it hit most of us and our companies basically hard as well. So this response stage is all about making immediate and tough decisions and shifting in survival mode. So we may have had to cut expenses, lay off people, take pay cuts, maybe cancel certain activities or delay certain projects. And I realized that this stage 1 happened in Hong Kong already in February. But this is when our employees needed a lot of support. And naturally people were at the time, and maybe still, not only worried and fearful for catching the virus, they also had stress about losing their job. And they may have been so distracted by personal stuff they got going on that they actually find it hard to focus on work at all. So as leaders, the first thing to do in uncertain situations is double down on empathy. Ask how people are doing, how they and their families are coping, how we can help and sincerely create time and space for listening and sharing emotions. Now, I've lived in China for quite a while, and I've lived, I think, also in Hong Kong or in Asia long enough to know that particularly in the Asian culture, people will not easily talk about emotions. But that doesn't mean we have to assume all is okay. So as long as people are overwhelmed and distracted by emotions, there's really no room for moving forward or thinking ahead and start being inventive and create plans. Now, as people start to calm down, that's when they start accepting the new situation. And that's the time we create new routines and adjust to this crisis situation. So what can often be helpful is taking people back to the core of the company, really saying, what is it that we set out to do? Why do we exist? You know, who do we serve as a company, and what are our core values? And this often can help us explain to people that certain immediate measures had to be taken for the good of the people and for the good of the business. Now, in hindsight, we can ask ourselves, what have we learned in this stage? How have we stayed connected with our people, and how supportive are they of the measures that we've taken as a result of that? Now, once people started accepting the new situation, that's when we go into stage 2, which is realism. So we're facing new realities with regard to our finances and with regard to our customers and suppliers and regarding our people. I've got a lot of background noise. I think Ryan, if he's on the call, if he could mute himself, because there's a little bit of a background noise going on. Thank you very much. So when we're in realism phase, we're facing new realities with regard to what's happening in the company, our finances, with regard to our customers, with regard to our suppliers, with regard to our own people. And this is the moment we have to start addressing short-term challenges. Since our reality has changed, we cannot really fall back into the way we used to do things. So it's time now really to start getting inventive and creative. Now, what is that? What is inventiveness? It's really the ability to improvise without proper tools and materials, without the real resources that we may have access to in the past. So how can we make the best with what we have? Now, being inventive and creative requires a couple of things. First of all, it requires a certain mindset, what's called a growth mindset. It's the belief that we can control the way we are versus having a fixed mindset when we may believe that we're born a certain way and we cannot change it. So it's called not mindset for nothing. You know, you can set your mind to it. It's that can-do attitude. It's seeing opportunities really beyond problems. Like Tony Robbins once said, when something terrible happens, do you think this is the end, which is the fixed mindset, or a new beginning, which is the growth mindset? And also, creativity is not something that some people have and other people don't. Everyone can be creative. It's when you believe in your own creativity and you believe in that you can find creative solutions to big problems. That's when it starts happening. It's also embracing curiosity. It's wanting to know things and exploring and investigating and asking lots of questions. So what this means for you and your team is basically, in this realism phase, a reshuffle of what the priorities are. Because short-term goals may change, and we need to take people along on our creativity journey, really get them to share their ideas, let them know we hear them, let them give us feedback. So in my work as a coach, I often work with leaders and teams to help them with that bottom-up approach, work through these changes and be more creative. Because when we involve them in the realism step of inventiveness and creativity, we're also showing them the ropes of what it means to be agile and build on the skills that we're going to need in the future, build on those resilient skills. So once the short-term measures are taken and implemented, that's when stage 3 follows, which is reimagination, looking at what's going to be the new normal and start planning for the longer term. And this can often be a challenge for 2 reasons. First of all, the full scope of the effects caused by the crisis are not visible yet, as many markets that we do business in or may do business in are still in maybe stage 1 or still in stage 2. Secondly, we're having to focus on reimagination on top of our current operations, which already have been affected and are not particularly running on automatic pilot yet. So what works best for companies struggling with challenges is separating roles or creating teams with each a different focus. So someone who is responsible for gathering data, someone who's responsible for developing insights, so who's really looking and gathering at all the markets that we're working in, what's happening there. Somebody who's focusing on developing strategy for the next 3, 6, 9, maybe 12 months. Someone or a team that focuses on daily operations. And someone who's coordinating internal and external communication. So everyone is informed about what's going on. So reimagination is really looking forward, but at the same time, keeping a close eye on current operations and keep motivating people by sharing and celebrating quick wins of the actions that were implemented earlier in stage 1 and 2. Now, the last stage is, sorry, I think we're going a little bit too far. So here we go. Last stage towards opportunity is reform. So until now, we've primarily been focusing on our own situation. And stage 4 is when we need to get clarity on the impact of the crisis from an industry perspective. So what's the impact of government interference and government regulations? What measures have other players in our industry taken going through the crisis themselves? And our whole playing field may have shifted as some clients or competitors or suppliers may not have survived or changed their strategies. So maybe what if social distancing is the new norm or physical borders stay in place? How will this change consumer behavior and can we be inventive and continue to reach our clients? Now, I heard a great example. I do it very quick, and then we go to Steve and listen what his experiences are with inventiveness and his view. But I just recently came about a great example of inventiveness when reading about an apparel company, a clothing company in the UK. And this company makes fashionable clothing for already years. They always strive to be trend-setting and producing quality fashion. But what they've done now is started producing trendy, fashionable face masks. And now we know in Hong Kong already, we're quite used to seeing people wearing all types of face masks, but that's different in the UK. Never ever people were having to wear face masks. So this company figured out by doing some research and thinking and creatively, they thought, well, okay, we have to get attention for this new product that we have. And we have to get attention on television. And what do people now? They're still in the lockdown in the UK. People watch a lot more television. So they looked at the numbers and they saw that the viewing numbers of local news had increased tremendously. So they contacted one of the producers of one of the shows, the local news shows. And imagine this, these producers, they have a huge problem. They have all these viewers, but not enough news items, because reporters cannot go out and interview people at the moment. They cannot report on location, so they're craving for new ideas. So they get contacted by this company who shares their idea with the face mask, and they had some video showing new models. And guess what? They're on local TV in a number of days. And the beauty is, what do national TV channels do? They have the same problem. So they watch what local TV channels are doing. So this item gets picked up by national television. And then imagine what that did for their product and their exposure. Now, obviously, you have to come up with what's something which is meaningful, something that's inventive, and that it serves an audience and adds value. So now we all have to realize really in which stage we are and what is required in terms of leadership in each of these stages. Now, continued support, empathy, clear communication, inventiveness, and involving people in the changes will often help move teams forward and will build that resilience and make our progression towards the new normal quicker and smoother. So let's meet Steve. He's an economist and a mathematician who has been a teacher. He's worked as a learning director for ESF schools and changed careers about 5 years ago when he launched optionsnoob.com, a platform where people are taught online about portfolio building and options trading. And other online ventures are the Young Hedge Fund Manager and the Math Ladder, where students are offered online learning programs. And his most recent project is called the Free School, an online learning platform to support homeschooling. Steve, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
You're unmuted already. Wonderful, wonderful. Let's kick our interview off with. Well, actually, you have to tell me. You have such an interesting career path. Can you tell me a little bit about how these career changes came about?
Yeah, sure. It's all about exploration, really. I got into derivatives from a project that I was doing at school about 12 years ago, and a student brought me an investigation that they wanted to look into around derivatives markets, and I was trying to help them, and I realized I didn't know anything about derivatives markets. So I spent the summer of that year, I went away and I thought I'll try and understand this, and I really got into it, and so I could help the student with their project, and it was really interesting. The mathematics behind it was really interesting. And then I started to explore some more, and I realized that you could use options then to buy shares at discount. So I started to trade myself, and then I used to teach people in person. And then the convenience of putting it online led me to building this sort of platform through Facebook first of all, and then onto my own website, just teaching people, introducing them to options and some of the strategies that you can do. And now there are people. It's a small but well-formed group of people from all over the world, from Australia, Asia, Europe, and the US who operate on that platform to learn and collaborate around options. And that really has been the sort of the common theme for the changes that I've made is going and looking at things and exploring them and figuring them out, and then talking to other people about them, and then sort of trying to present some sort of solution for people's problems. And that's really been the basis of everything that I've done.
Wow, wonderful. Well, it's incredible the steps that you've taken, and that it made a whole switch in your career. And I think because we're talking about a lot of startup companies, and people might be interested to know, if you're trying things out and you thought of a new product, how do you know whether new projects or the new products that you're working on were actually marketable? How did you test your products before launching?
Yeah, so this was probably why it's taken me so long to do anything, is that originally I'd spend maybe 5 to 7 years building optionsnew.com, or the basis for that, lots of creation but now I've sort of realized that I can fast track that process. Instead of my previous instincts was to have the idea, build the solution, and then try to present something almost fully formed to people. And it took me a long time to realize that I needed to start with the idea and then almost immediately be trying to talk to people about how it would work for them, to avoid me going down this sort of tunnel. So now I think in this year, for example, I've tried to really accelerate that process of from idea to creation by talking to people as quickly as possible. I'll give you a little example around that. The free school really has come about since the pandemic as a solution to some of the problems around homeschooling. And I took all of my educational experience and my online learning experience and tried to think about how I could get a solution for families and students who were trying to learn at home. So if I'd have done this 10 years ago, I might have spent 5 years trying to build it. But this time I literally built a really rough framework and launched it literally a few weeks ago. And now there are over 100 families in there on that, and the purpose of that is for me to have a conversation and find out how it works for them, so that I can immediately know what works and what doesn't, and then build what they need in conversation with them. So that's really been a big change in recent years from my first attempts at building things, was to do it with people. So that idea of co-creation is really important, I think, to go from idea to something that works in a short amount of time, and that's been transformational for me this year, out of the crisis that we've faced.
Wow, it's because that's what we often hear with the agile approach that larger companies, larger IT organizations are working with, because they are. But if you're on the smaller scale, you can really make these moves very quickly, because you're so close to your end user that you're actually building this for, that you can move much quicker.
Yeah, I really enjoy that idea of agility as somebody that's working on a almost individually, but at scale with people from all over the world as well. That you can make decisions really fast. You can get almost immediate responses through social media, and literally having a live conversation while you're developing it. I can get comments coming in, and then I can literally change something and push it out in minutes or hours. That agile response is quite amazing with the technology that we've got available.
And I think for startup companies, that's such a huge advantage that they have over larger companies, where there's those processes will, although they call themselves agile, are bound to go much slower than what you can do. So I was just wondering, what's been the most important thing for you? What in all the ventures that you've been undertaken, is there any red line or anything that's underlying that which is of most importance in what you do?
I suppose I'm always looking to solve a problem that people have got. If I can solve a problem that they've got, then I think that I've got something worthwhile that I can put out into the world. And that can be solving a problem, or it can be moving them forward somehow from A to B. So those are the things that I sort of naturally get drawn to, is that I want to make things that solve a problem. And because of the technology as well, I like to try to do it and solve a problem at scale. So I'm all about putting things online, so that if I can solve it for 2, 3, 4, 5 people, it can potentially solve the same problem for hundreds.
Yeah, and I guess that links nicely back to the theory, that that's where the value is, because you can create so many products, but the only value that you can have is if you're really solving a problem and you're really helping people out with what you're offering. So that's really great. And I was just wondering, under what circumstances, if we're talking about inventiveness and coming to that space of creation and really thinking about what can I improve, what can I do even better, are there particular circumstances that you feel that energy and that inventiveness? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I very naturally, I love to create things. This is probably why I like to go and build things and spend a lot of time, putting things down, putting programs down, or educational pathways down for people or students. I love to build that thing, so I can actually I feel a lot of energy from it, and I can get really engrossed in it. And sometimes, I have to remember that I'm creating it for other people. So I do find that energy in that, but then I need to go and make sure that I get that feedback from the end users as well, so that I'm constantly making sure it works for them. Otherwise, I can get too engrossed in my own sort of creative process and forget that the world exists outside me. But I love creating things, and that's where I really lose myself.
Yeah, great. And it sounds like with your new project, you've been able also to put things in place relatively quickly. Because I was just thinking, if it's about homeschooling, it's only been a couple of months since that's been a real issue, and you've already got your product out there and your solution out there, and it's still very much needed. Maybe not in Hong Kong where schools have opened up, but definitely in other parts of the world. So that's really remarkable. I'm just wondering if we're talking about now coming out of the Corona crisis in Hong Kong, at least. What do you think will be different? What are some of the elements that you think, well, they may be going to stay here and it will be different from now on?
So I suppose that, I mean, a lot of this is already out there in the news. So there's nothing revolutionary here, but I see this massive acceleration in online learning and remote working. And in the last 3 months, we've probably had like a 2 to 3 year acceleration in pickup of all of these things. Grandparents are Zoom in, people who wouldn't have been teaching online lessons 6 months ago and now doing it on a regular basis. Remote working practices are coming in, and I think a lot of companies and institutions are seeing the benefits of that. They're not necessarily seeing it as a drag or a hardship. They're actually seeing that as there are a lot of potential wins there. So I look forward to a year or 2 years down the line, and I see a lot more of this. And that was part of the impetus really for developing Free School, was to provide online education pathways at scale for the end users for free. And I could see that's not just going to be a thing for this year, that's going to go beyond next year, and it will stick around in the same way that a lot of the technologies that we developed back in the original SARS outbreak in 2002, 2003, we put things online very quickly then, and they stuck. We realized the benefit of them back then, and that's really where I'm trying to see where that's going to be, and then start to build now, so that I can be in the right place in a year or 2 years time with the infrastructure and the feedback from people with a good quality product that is able to deliver a solution at scale. So those are the areas in remote learning, remote working, and acceleration, and people embracing all of those practices. Those are the big things that I'm working towards.
Yeah, and that's I guess for people tuning in today and for startup companies, that's where the opportunities are, I guess, as well, because things are changing so rapidly, so quickly. This is where the opportunities are, especially for smaller skills companies that can jump on those opportunities and really find a good solid market for some of the elements that are going to stay for a longer term. So as a final question for you, Steve, I wonder, you've already given so much interesting information, but what would you advise our listeners for today?
So, you know, I sort of don't want to give the impression that this year has been really easy in a way. It's not been easy. It's been very hard in all sorts of ways that I never really imagined. So, you know, I don't want to pretend that it's just been a bed of roses. It's been difficult on all sorts of fronts, and I imagine that a lot of the people out, you know, out in the world are feeling it in all sorts of ways as well. But for me, it was a case of, you know, we're taking some hits this year, and that's hard, but always to be looking for the silver lining and exploring the possibilities. And that's been one of the themes of whatever I've done, is that idea of exploration and opportunity, and going and playing with things and seeing what you can do in with the new sort of landscape that you're presented with. So we're presented with a landscape that's going to be increasingly remote, increasing online ways of working. You know, how can you, in whatever your business is, how can you pivot towards that and start to you know, embrace and look for those opportunities? So explore and play and look for silver linings would be my message.
Yeah. All right. Well, wonderful words. Thank you very, very much, Steve, for sharing your personal story and shining your light on what inventiveness means to you, and also shedding your light a little bit towards the future and where the opportunities are. Thank you very much.
Can I just say thank you for the presentation previously as well, and also thank you for being such a fantastic interviewer. It's always been a pleasure. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're
very cool welcome. Under pressure.
Right. Now, we have a short Q&A later on if we have the time. But before we go to any questions, I'd like to say that if you're struggling in any of the 4 stages, is it respond, in the realism stage, in reimagination, or reform, where I'd like to invite you as a gift for attending this webinar to contact me, as I'm offering a limited number of complimentary diagnostic sessions, as I'd like to help really navigate people in this time moving forward. So that's why I'm allocating time in my calendar during May and June to coach or consult or mentor anyone who's interested to get some support, and that'll be free of charge. On the screen, you'll see my email address. Just drop me an email by tomorrow night with what it is that you'd like to talk about, and I'll get back to you and we'll schedule a session. If you'd like to get in contact with Steve on anything that he shared with us today, or if you're interested in his options trading platform or in training on the hedge funding, or please reach out to him via LinkedIn, and you'll find the link here on the screen as well. Now, I'd just like to tune in if there's any questions from the audience. And Steve, maybe you want to stay on mute as well, or off mute actually, and see if there would be any questions coming in for you. So open up the chat. And I think it's a quick round of questions, looking at the time, because we don't want to go too much over time. Any question, please put them in the chat. If there's no questions, that's fine too. We are getting close to a wrap-up time. A couple of last things that I'd like to mention as we're coming close to the end. I'd like to really like you to remember 3 points, basically. Do tap in to the growth mindset. That helps us to get to that place of inventiveness. Stay positive and take care of your people. A second thing that I'd like to mention is really that, and as Steve said it as well, stay connected with your people. Because connection and network are really majorly important. So connect to each other as well. And that's the value basically of the Startup China Club, reaching out to fellow entrepreneurs, connecting, being each other's sounding board, being each other's supporter in the club. And as Belinda mentioned at the kickoff today, do reach out to her or check us out on Facebook when you're interested in joining the Startup China Club. We're all looking forward to having you with us and grow an active community that supports each other. So hopefully we can welcome you and connect with you personally, hopefully next time at one of our next events. And finally, I'd like to share with you a quote that will hopefully rings true for every one of us. Anywhere the struggle is great, the level of ingenuity and inventiveness is high. So I'd like to thank you for being here today with us. Thank you very much for your attention. Take good care, everyone, and I hope to meet every one of you again soon. Thank you.